Disinformation knows no borders, and today the stakes seem higher than ever. Welcome to TruthTalks, a brave new podcast series tackling the challenges of fake news and propaganda head on. Join us for engaging short conversations with experts from all EU member states and Ukraine as we uncover the truth behind dominant disinformation trends and explore the strategies shaping Europe's fight against manipulation. In this episode, we are zooming in on Lithuania, a country on the front lines of the information war, sharing a border with Russia and facing constant hybrid threats. Our guest today is Viktor Denisenko, head of the Center for Communication Influences and Propaganda Research at the Faculty of Communication at Vilnius University. Welcome to Truth Talks.
Hello.
Hello. Lithuania has long been a target of Russian disinformation campaigns, even before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. What are the key narratives being pushed today, and how have they evolved in response to recent geopolitical events?
So it's true that Lithuania, long time ago, was find out by Russia as one of a target for disinformation and for propaganda activities. I could say that in this case, quite important our historical relations with Russia, because history of relations between Lithuania and Russia, it's history of first of all Russian occupation, Soviet occupation in 20th century. So from beginning our relations was not very good. And if we're talking about propaganda and disinformation, I could say that first elements of so-called information warfare in between Lithuania and Russia, or better to say in between of Baltic states, keeping in mind that Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, we have quite similar history. And Russia, we could find it, I could say, 3 decades ago. Because from beginning, there are a lot of different narratives, first of all, about Russian-speaking minorities in Lithuania, but in general in Baltic states, about violation of rights of Russian-speaking minorities, etc. Of course, when we're talking about this challenge today, we should keep in mind geopolitical situation. We should keep in mind this war of Russia against Ukraine. Today we have a lot of different narratives. One of most popular, if I could say, narratives which Russia trying to use against Lithuania, it's a narrative about support of Ukraine. Lithuania represents like a kind of very hostile state, which trying to do everything against Russia, and of course with support of Ukraine also seen in Russian disinformation as this hostile action. Lithuania in general supports war, because in this Russian narrative, it's not Russia begin war, but it's Ukraine fighting war against Russia, and so on. Of course, another main narrative that Lithuania, it's not independent states. It means that we are just puppets of European Union or NATO, or first of all, United States. Also traditional narrative, and I could say that in a Russian view of world, United States, it's like a main hostile actor, and another states or another international organizations quite often represents in Kremlin propaganda just like puppets of Washington. Also, I could say that Russian propaganda reacting to so-called agenda setting, to actual events, and today, for example, I could say that one of the biggest narratives when we're talking about narratives which Russia constructing against Lithuania or in general against Baltic states, it's a narrative about energetical security, because a few days ago Baltic states we go out from so-called BREL. It was electricity connection with Russia and Belarus, so we changed our connection to connection with the European market, with European Union. We go to this task past, I could say, 10 years. So finally we did it. But of course, Russia represents it's like a factor of energetical instability. Of course, it's a lot of narratives that now cost of electricity will grow up, and it's only because Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia made this decision. So it's a lot of narratives, and I think if I would try to present all full list, it will be very, very long talk.
I would like to ask you now, how do you know it's Russian disinformation? Do you trace any proofs for that?
Of course, it's very good question, because I once stressed that today it's not enough say that I don't like this narrative, so it's disinformation. It also would be a manipulation. First of all, we trying to check narratives, and I could say that in Lithuania today we have quite strong community of fact checkers, journalists who working with this issue, and just trying to figure out which elements of these narratives are false. Also, in general, in Lithuania, we quite well known main sources of so-called Kremlin propaganda, because it's quite easy to figure out that such kind of media, or like sites which pretending be mass media, like Sputnik or Russia Today, RT, or even we have kind like a specific media which Russia created for Baltic states, Balt News, and so on. We could say that we are talking about well-known sources of propaganda and disinformation. But of course, it's you could not say automatically that it's from Balt News and it's automatically it's propaganda, because quite often different kind of information mixed in this mass media. So main criteria, I could say, when we're talking about disinformation or propaganda, or especially about disinformation, it's a question of facts. Thus, we're talking about some facts, or here is false information. Also, we should keep in mind that propaganda not always fakes, because main point for propaganda is manipulation. Yeah, when actors who spreading this propaganda or disinformation, they could try to provide false context or not provide all facts, and providing just part of truth. So it also could be a tool of propaganda and disinformation. So of course, every time when we're talking about some kind of narratives, it's important to prove we really talking about something which not connected to reality perfectly.
So you mentioned Russia, but are there any other actors that are active in creating and or spreading disinformation in Lithuania?
I could say that Russia is main actor, and even I could say main visible actor. But of course, we could find more more action, because also possible talk about propaganda from Belarus, which also quite often in Lithuania even be making kind of mistake when we talking about this propaganda from Belarus, and mixing it with propaganda of Russia, and saying, Belarus, it's not really independent state. The geopolitical position of Belarus, the state sitting in pocket of Moscow. So why we should keep our attention on their narratives, because with Belarus propaganda is similar to Russian propaganda, but I'm not agree with this position, because some research shows that it could be a little bit different. For Belarus, I could say still main narrative is about border. We could say that in focus of Belarus propaganda, still ongoing crisis on border between Belarus and Lithuania, Belarus and Poland, and Belarus and Latvia in general, on border between Belarus and European Union. Still, we have kind of artificially created migration crisis, which was created by Lukashenko regime. So, and in focus of Belarus propaganda, it's specific narratives about this border issue, I could say. Also, maybe not so visible, but time to time we could find some narratives. It's propaganda from China. So also I could say that possibly, especially in Lithuania, it's a specific thing, because geopolitically we have kind of conflict between Lithuania and China, because of our support for democracy in Taiwan. And we have in Vilnius a representative office of Taiwan, named by Taiwan, not Taipei. So really we could find out that sometimes China remembering that it's somewhere exists Lithuania, and it's not so good relations with Lithuania, but I could say that interesting point that China quite often just repeating some narratives of Kremlin propaganda. And we could talk about kind of cooperation between Moscow and Beijing in this field of propaganda and disinformation.
Okay, you are mentioning first Russia, then there is a long time no player on the ranking, and then there is Belarus and China. I would like to ask you also about the activity in this information field of internal actors, like, for example, politicians, Lithuanian politicians. Is it the case? Politicians, influencers, and so on.
I could say that yes, it's a case, but quite small one when we're talking about Lithuania, and really quite small when we're comparing to, I don't know, to another countries, for example. Because yes, we have some politicians who repeats some narratives which we could say have some connections to this Kremlin propaganda. Of course, I'm talking, it's here also, it's always question. Does person repeating these narratives because he is in the influence of Kremlin or just because he really believe to, I don't know, something, to believe that vaccines could kill or so on, because it's really hard to find this border between influence and real views of persons. But in Lithuania, I could say that possibly we have quite a unique situation, because in general, when we're talking about political sphere, and even when we're talking about this public sphere of influencers, we have quite strong and dominating consensus about main points in this political agenda. For example, about support for Ukraine, about what happens in Ukraine. But for us, it's very clear that Russia is aggressor and Ukraine trying to defend own independence. I could say that we quite aware of, in general, of action of Kremlin propaganda, and it's true that in Lithuania, this focus to information warfare, I could say this focus we have long before Crimea and even before Russian war against Georgia in 2008. So I think that really when we're talking about this public sphere where some ideas, some narratives exist, we have quite strong consensus about main points.
I would like also to ask you if all this disinformation effort is targeting specific groups, for example, the one you've mentioned already, that is Russian-speaking minorities, or is it targeting the whole Lithuanian society?
I could say that this specter of topics which Kremlin propaganda use, it is a really big list. Yeah, and it means that different topics which could affect different groups in Lithuanian society. So Russian-speaking population, it's one possible group, and in Lithuania we quite often saying that potentially these national minorities are more vulnerable in face of this Kremlin propaganda because of this factor of language, because possibly some information easier goes to this to attention of this Russian-speaking minority. But also I could say that Russia trying to make influence to different groups in Lithuanian society, because some ideas of Kremlin could be good for different groups. For example, as usual, I could mention that people who have like a radical political views, and it's even not important as we're talking about far right or far left, because Kremlin have some narratives which looks like quite interesting for such groups. For example, this narratives against LGBT community or anti-fascistic struggle narrative or so on. Also, it's quite visible that Kremlin propaganda trying to use real problems. It means problems of social care, for example, or problems of vulnerable people who have not good financial ground. Yeah, because it's easier to use real problems, and it's you could achieve best effect when you just choosing some problem and beginning to manipulate to to push this narrative to make kind of absolutization. Yeah, because every country have some economical problems, but actors of Kremlin propaganda, they not talk about some economical problems. They try to represent these problems like a catastrophe for Lithuania or for another countries.
Okay, now I would like to ask you about the uniqueness, any unique specific characteristics of disinformation landscape in Lithuania. And I know you've already mentioned the Chinese interest in spreading disinformation in Lithuania. Are there any other unique features of the Lithuanian landscape?
It's really hard to say because we are living in age of information and in age of global information. And even when we're talking about some narratives against Lithuania, quite often it's not only against Lithuania. It's possibly in general against Baltic states, because when we're talking about Kremlin propaganda, quite often three Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, we are going like one package. Yeah, so it's against Baltic states. Also, a lot of narratives in general against NATO, and we are part of NATO, so it's quite often against us, against the Western world, because also you could say that Lithuania and Baltic states, we are part of Western world. So it's hard to find some kind of specific narratives. Maybe I mentioned this story about our efforts to achieve this energetical independence and this decision of synchronization, energetical synchronization with European countries. It's specific narrative, but quite often it's like a common narratives against West, against NATO, against European Union. So it's really to find out some exotic specific of Lithuania in these narratives.
Okay, and the final question, so that we can try at least to be a little more constructive in the end. What's being done to counter disinformation in Lithuania, and what more would you recommend?
Oh, as usual, it's a big question, and it's tough question, because in Lithuania, from my point of view, it's very important that we recognize this challenge, and it's a big deal, because I have some conversation with my colleagues from another countries, from Slovak, from Hungary, and quite often they are not so happy, because they're saying that authorities not recognizing this problem. So in Lithuania we have no problem in this case. It means that Lithuanian authorities recognize what something should be. Of course, it was some decisions to just block some media from cable networks, television cable networks in Lithuania. Here we first of all talking about Russian TV channels which were retransmitting Lithuanian cable networks. Also, it was some attempts to block information in internet, or, for example, Sputnik network and so on. But we should keep in mind that in 21st century, it's not so easy to stop spread of some kind of information or disinformation. I think that best solution still, when we're talking about this challenge of propaganda and disinformation, it's media literacy. It means that we should prepare our society, we should ensure that people will be possible just to recognize some narratives of disinformation, but they will not share this disinformation on social media, etc. In Lithuania, in this field of media literacy, first of all, are working non-governmental organizations. Also, we have a quite old idea that possibly this media literacy should be integrated to school programs, but still it's a lot of work to do that, because it's question about, first of all, we should have teachers. It should be also kind of a reform of education. So it's not so easy to do. Still, I hope in nearest future it will be real steps in this field. But my answer is, it's not unique, and it's quite usual. Media literacy, first of all, it's the best answer.
But as you're saying, it may take a lot of time because it has already taken a lot of time and still there is no media literacy classes in the curriculum. But let's hope they will come soon. Okay, that brings us to the end of our conversation about the Lithuanian disinformation landscape. Victor, thank you for sharing these valuable insights.
Thank you.
TruthTalks series is part of the project Guardians of Truth, fact-checking during Poland's EU presidency, which is supported by European Media and Information Fund, managed by Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation.